Welcome to the 2024 NCWIT Summit on Women and IT. We are so thrilled to be here in Kansas City, and it is wonderful to see so many of you here today. Welcome also to the live stream viewers. I heard a tip that there are almost 100 people from HPE watching us today, so welcome to you as well. For those here in person, if you would like closed captioning, please scan the QR code on the screen. Hold, please. There we go. Scan the QR code on the screen and follow the link to have it streamed to your personal device. We wish to open the 2024 NCWIT Summit by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, Kansas City, is the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Kickapoo, Kaw, Osage, Shawnee, Nutachi, and the Oceti, Sakowin, or Sioux nations. In addition, we recognize that numerous other nations, including the Delaware and Wyandot, also had a presence here at different times. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While NCWIT can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous people, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices and knowledge systems of Indigenous NCWIT community members, partners, and staff and their work. Exploring opportunities for educational initiatives and research endeavors that integrate Indigenous knowledge systems and practices into our broader efforts to enhance diversity in technology, and developing initiatives and partnerships that enhance access and inclusion for Indigenous peoples within the tech industry, ensuring culturally responsive practices that respect and incorporate Indigenous traditions and perspectives. This land acknowledgement reflects NCWIT's core mission of broadening the influential and meaningful participation of historically underrepresented groups in computing and technology to foster innovation and development. We are also fortunate to have a welcome from Missouri's own Congressman Emanuel Cleaver to open the summit.
Hello, I'm Emanuel Cleaver. I represent Missouri's 5th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I would like to welcome members of NCWIT community to Kansas City for your 2024 summit. NCWIT's mission of increasing the meaningful and influential participation of those marginalized by gender in tech is critical. Our world needs as many ideas, as much creativity, and as much passion as possible to solve the complex problems we face. And this NCWIT community is doing the important work needed to make sure the organizations that educate and employ our technologists are inclusive and welcoming, and to make sure individual students are supported and encouraged. I am grateful for your presence and participation, as that alone is testament to the unwavering commitment of each of you in uplifting and championing the contributions of women in technology. Let us engage, inspire, and collaborate as we strive for a future where diversity and inclusion are the cornerstones of innovation and technology. Welcome to Missouri's largest city, and thank you all for all you're doing to make sure that all voices can be heard.
All right, so some of you are members who've been with NCWIT a very long time. Some of you are new members. And some of you are not yet members at all, though we hope you will join us. For those of you who are new to NCWIT, NCWIT unites more than 1,600 more member organizations across the computing ecosystem to ensure that members of historically marginalized groups have access to the technology opportunities that we have in our world today. We do this through the creation of resources, tools, and programs that our member organizations use to make change within their own organizations. And we also support the people who educate and employ technologists. You'll learn more about these throughout the conference. But let's begin by talking about the future of tech and why we have chosen that to be this year's theme. You won't be able to read a lot of this slide, so I will let you know what it says. Technologies are advancing and changing rapidly, with a widespread unmet need for employees and expertise. In a recently published McKinsey report, the research showed that 15 key technology trends have a varying degree of growth and also job opportunities available. You can see on this slide, for example, in the very top left, that applied AI has the highest number of job postings, and next generation software development, which is the next graph with the very steep angle at the top, shows the most rapid growth at 29% growth in a single year. This slide, which you also will not be able to read, but I will explain, and you can always look at them later. These sectors also show that, by and large, there's a talent gap. Note the purple circles on the left. These are the gaps, and the larger circles show larger gaps. The blue circles on the right show where there's a small number of areas that have an excess in talent. And a couple that I pulled out just to draw your attention to, the space technologies subsector has an excess of people with remote sensing expertise, and that blue dot on the right indicates that there are 60 skilled people available for every single job opening. But there's a deficit in those with aerospace industrial expertise. That's the far left large circle that's purple, with fewer than one person available per 10 job openings. And the second line there is another one I thought I'd pull out. Within the future of mobility sector, which is technologies that aim to improve the efficiency and sustainability of land and air transportation of people, goods, using autonomous connected electric vehicles, there are no areas at all that have an excess of talent. These technology trends are notable in and of themselves, but their impact and their pervasiveness on various industries causes us to emphasize the importance of these technologies being created equitably and deployed ethically. For example, applied AI impacts 20 of the 21 categorized industries, and every industry is impacted by at least one of the top 15 technology trends. As evidenced by the list on the previous slide, technology is present across the board, even in places we traditionally may not expect to find it. Consumer packaged goods, for example, is impacted by 5 of the 15 technology trends. When we think about cultural sectors instead of industry sectors, the same is true. Consider the impact technology is having on art, music, dance, sports. Technology is influencing our everyday lives in ways we may not have predicted in the past. As technologies become more embedded and more powerful, we must consider not just the technology itself, but the impact they have on people, from those who create them to those who use them, to those who have neither created nor used them, but still are impacted by them. During the summit, we invite you to imagine how our world continues to evolve and the position of technology within it. We also want you to think about our collective goal, all of us, of broadening participation, and how we can continue to encourage a more ethical and equitable future in tech. Each of us in this room has a role to play in this goal, and the unique structure of the NCWIT community gives us the opportunity to come together and make progress collectively across the entire computing ecosystem. Each of you contributes to progress in one or more areas, and we've accomplished a great deal together already. This slide describes the full ecosystem, and each NCWIT member organization connects in some way to this slide. Additionally, we have programs and initiatives as well that you can see that are part of the ecosystem as well. A few examples of the impact that all of you are already having. The first is Aspirations in Computing. The Aspirations in Computing community now has more than 29,500 people marginalized by gender who share a passion for tech. And our 1,600 member organizations offer them opportunities that help them grow, persist, thrive. They are building the next generation of STEM professionals. And in that community, 89% of the people who recently responded to a survey and are in college report a major or minor in a STEM field, with 76% in computing or engineering specifically. This is a stark contrast to the 4% of all women who earn such degrees. Additionally, despite research saying that women as a group tend to leave the major, 97% of the respondents from our survey of the AIC community said they were likely to stay in the major. All of you from higher ed institutions are also doing great work. Computing departments that join NCWIT perform better than their non-member peers and graduate a higher percentage of women, 24%, than the national average, 21%. In addition, since 2006, the NCWIT Higher Ed Alliance members have consistently averaged higher growth rates than non-members in the percentage of women completing computing degrees. The workforce is also doing a lot of great things around inclusion and diversifying the workforce. Member companies who have used the Tech Inclusion Journey, which is our proprietary online decision support platform, showed improvement in key measures of inclusive culture. 91% of participants reported their ability to help create a more inclusive work environment had improved. 96% reported thinking more about how subtle bias might be occurring at work, and 86% reported that it is easier to bring up bias-related topics at work after having used the Tech Inclusion Journey. And yet, the rapid pace of technological advancement reminds us that our work needs to continue and that we need to keep an eye on what's coming next. You think back to that previous slide about the industries that are growing so rapidly, and we need to make sure that we're keeping all of those pieces in mind as we move forward. We hope this summit serves as an opportunity for you to learn, reflect, share, and be inspired about continuing our collective work to broaden participation. So, what can you expect at the summit? Here is what to look forward to. Today, we will begin with awards that honor our Pioneer in Tech and our collegiate awardees as well. Then, after a keynote that highlights the challenges and opportunities within STEM cultures, we will have a performance by a dance troupe that is inspiring participation in STEM through dance. After that, you will attend an alliance meeting to connect with others in your same portion of the ecosystem. Be sure to join us for the reception after that. And then tomorrow, we'll start by celebrating our Educator Award winners. Then we'll stay in the plenary room for a panel discussion on working toward a more inclusive future for tech. After that, we'll break out for workshops, lunch, and more workshops. And finally, come back together for a discussion on the history and science of race. And finally, on Wednesday, our last day together, we'll start with breakfast and 2 more celebratory awards. Then we will hear from our inspirational speaker, Billy Mills. After that talk, we'll share a networking brunch where you can reconnect and share what you've learned with others before you head home. Don't forget about Whova. So everything you need to know about the NCWIT Summit is on the Whova app. If you haven't downloaded it yet, please do so. You can use the QR code here. You can also use that URL for the web app. And if you have questions, always feel free to stop by the registration desk. Our staff there is happy to assist you. Also, we have a place for you to share your photos. So you can upload photos to this Drop Event site and put a few captions on there and share it with other attendees. So don't forget to do that. And I want to make sure to thank our sponsors who make all of this possible. Our programmatic sponsors of NCWIT overall are here on this slide. Thank you. And our summit-specific sponsors are PNC and VSP. So thank you to all of our sponsors. We wouldn't be here today without them. And finally, be sure to keep an eye out for our collegiate award winners and our AIC ambassadors, because they truly are the future of tech. All right, and now I would like to invite Rose Kopp to the stage. Rose is a vice president in technology at PNC Financial Services. PNC has been a generous summit sponsor since 2018 and an NCWIT member since 2016. Rose leads the Business Management Office and is responsible for financial management, communication, employee engagement, and talent strategy, so you're basically bored. She's the working sponsor of the Technology Early Career Programs and president of Tech Connect, PNC's Women in Tech group. Welcome, Rose.
NCWIT has a very special award that recognizes a lifetime of contributions in technology, the NCWIT Pioneer in Tech Award. This award was created in 2012 to recognize individuals whose lifetime contributions have changed the way we think about women's participation in the history of computing. These award-winning technologists have forged a trail for all of us who have since entered the field. It is our honor to recognize Francine Berman as the 2024 NCWIT Pioneer in Tech Award winner. Dr. Francine Berman is the Director of Public Interest Technology and the Stuart Rice Honorary Research Professor in the College of Information and Computer Sciences at UMass Amherst. Berman was the inaugural recipient of the ACM IEEECS Ken Kennedy Award for Influential Leadership in the Design, Development, and Deployment of National-Scale Cyber Infrastructure. In 2015, Berman was nominated by President Obama and confirmed by the U.S. Senate to become a member of the National Council on the Humanities. In 2019, she was elected to membership in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Berman is a public interest technologist and a data scientist. Her current focus is building the community, infrastructure, content, and trajectory of the nascent area of public interest technology. Her scholarly research has focused on the social and environmental impacts of information technology, and in particular, the Internet of Things, a deeply interconnected ecosystem of billions of devices and systems that are transforming commerce, science, and society. Please join me in welcoming Fran Berman to the stage.
Okay, good. Hi, how are you? All right, I have some slides. And so here's the first slide. I so want to thank NC Wit and all of you. This was like an incredible surprise, and it's an incredible honor. And I have to say, in my many, many years of working in our community, the Women of Tech community, that it is incredibly gratifying to get this kind of award. So I thought I would chat with you a few minutes about what this means to me and what this trajectory has been like. And the first thing I want to tell you is that nobody does anything without a village of people. And that certainly includes me. And so I just thought I would show you some of the people in my village. These are some folks who have been incredibly meaningful to me and have served as inspirations and mentors along the way. I want to show special attention to the folks in the upper right, my personal advisory committee. These are my two children and my daughter-in-law who are so inspiring to me. They are many of your generation. They are doing thoughtful things in the world. They are making their way and making it better for all of us. And I have to say there are inspirations all around us, and I wanted to sort of share with you some inspirations who I've had. Many of you will recognize my good friend Jan Cuny, who I have known for, honestly, 40 years. And we were much younger in that picture. Let me just point that out. So I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, and oftentimes you go to these wonderful conferences and people get awards, and then they give talks, and the talk says, you know, I did this and I did that, and, you know, it was hard, and I made it, and you can make it too. And as an audience member, okay, whatever. But, you know, I have these like 10 problems at home, and how does that help me solve them? So I said to a colleague of mine, Colette Basilier, who is Executive Director of Public Interest Technology, New England, you know, I'd really love this to be a Q&A because that always gets to the heart of people's questions. And Colette said, hey, I'll ask you some questions. And so these are Colette's questions. I promise I won't answer all of them. But they kind of clumpified. And one set of questions was really, you know, how do you get here? You know, you're 700 years old, you've done a lot of stuff. You know, how do you kind of get from one thing to another? How do you make opportunities? And the other set of questions are really about, a good theme for this conference, our hopes for the future, which is, you know, given that it's possible that our AI overlords are going to destroy the world in any minute, you know, what are the hopes for the future and how can we make this a better place for all of us? So I thought I would just answer sort of those two themes and then get to other things. So how did you get here? And this is a very, very busy slide that gives you a snapshot of my own career. It does look like a random walk from one place to another, which it actually hasn't been. But like most people, I've had a number of different jobs. It was often the case when it was time, you get a little root-bound sometime in a job, and it's time to repot yourself. And so there have been a number of times when it really felt like you wanted to learn new things and do new things, and I had that opportunity throughout a number of positions. My interests changed. And I think that many of you will find that or have already found that along the way. When you're 6 years old, you don't like vegetables so much. When you're 26, you might feel different. When you're 36, you definitely feel different. So your interests change along the way. So I want to tell you a couple of things about this slide. Number one, there's a lot of transitions. And oftentimes you hear people say, yeah, they called me up and said, would you like to be Secretary of State? You know, would you like to star in this Hollywood movie? And, you know, I was so surprised. But my own experience, and most of the people I know, is that you have to make your own magic. You know, when you're feeling ready to make a transition, when you feel compelled to make a transition, It's the relationships that matter. It's the way you kind of look at the future that matters. It's the things that you pursue matter. And the fact is that all of your friends who are really important to you, you need them for your professional trajectory, you need them for your personal trajectory, you need them to complain to, you need them to go out for wine and celebrate with you when it's time to celebrate. All of those relationships will really hold you in good stead. And for me, when I've transitioned from one place to another, it isn't just that somebody calls me up and says, hey, Fran, would you like to do this? It's usually people I've known for a while. We've had shared experiences together. We've talked about things. You know, it's very rarely that you do something cold. So, you know, one of the things that I would like to share with you is it really is making your own magic. It isn't all your own magic. There's a lot of serendipity in all of this, but making your own magic is really helpful as you go from one thing to the next. The other thing I want to tell you about this slide is that it's a really pretty version of the truth, which is what all of our bios are, aren't they? You know, I did this, then I did that, and then, you know, I was on this. But the fact is, they don't include a lot of the important stuff. So one thing this doesn't include is this doesn't include all the jobs I didn't get. It doesn't include all the grants I didn't get. It doesn't include the time and I discovered that I was paid a third less than everybody else who had my same job, and I had to talk to people about that. It doesn't include all the friends I made. It doesn't include all the friends that I lost. It doesn't include, you know, when my parents died or when I had cancer, which I'm okay now. It doesn't include any of that stuff. And I want to say that that part of your life is really important too. In fact, arguably, it's more important. That's a little hard to see when you're at the beginning of your career, but when you're closer to the end of your career, it really hits you. And so the other takeaway, I think, from this slide is that you have a whole life. You don't just have your career and the contributions you want to make, and you're making contributions in your whole life. And you don't give that short shrift. It's really important. Your family, your friends, your kids, your relatives, people you don't even know that you really care about, they're important too. Okay, let's get to Colette's second question about robot overlords. What about the future of tech? And I know I would be shocked if you told me that there are people in this room that are not worried about the future of tech, because these days pretty much everybody is. And it's the tech that we work on. We're excited about it. It's innovative. It's you know, doing things that we never imagined that it would do. And but we need a really hefty dose these days of social responsibility. That a lot of the tech we've created in our community has become critical infrastructure. But the regular critical infrastructure rules that protect the public do not apply. And so a few years ago, I had the opportunity, through a bunch of relationships I had made a long time before, to go to UMass and help sort of take on what it would be like to reboot higher education to be more socially responsible around tech. And that's the emerging field of public interest technology. And I will tell you that that incredibly compels me. We're creating amazing tools, and we want them to be used as forces for good. So at UMass, I've had the opportunity to work across campus and develop, you know, courses and certificates and whatever we need to do in higher education, which is often quite parochial, in order to give our students, who are today's and tomorrow's professionals, a sense of social responsibility. We've worked across the New England region, which has been really exciting, and for myself and many others who call themselves public interest technologists, not that many people so far, we're getting a chance to invent a field. This is taking up a lot of my time these days. I'm writing a book on it. I'm really excited about that. And it's really a thrill and an honor to be able to wake up every day and do something you're passionate about. Not every moment of those days are a lot of fun, let me tell you, but it's been a really great thing, and I hope for you that you have things that you are passionate about, and I encourage you to do that. Okay, so my last slide, thank you, Fran, now time to get off, is that I want to say that I am really excited for all of you. You are now my new inspirations. Some of you are my new mentors as well. I think it's really important for us to be growing our community. I'm really excited for what you're going to do. You're going to have many years ahead of you. Not everything is going to be easy, but you're going to be making your own magic and using this network and using other networks that you have. And I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing, for all you're going to do, and I'm just really excited to see what you do next. So thank you very much.
It's very, very heavy. Do you want me to carry it down for you?
I think you're going to send it to me.
Oh,
So
we're
should I
going to
leave
send it
it
to you. Yes, okay. Let's leave it here then. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Fran, and congratulations again. Okay. In the spirit of recognizing technologists from multiple generations, we now transition to NCWIT's Aspirations in Computing Collegiate Award. Today, we are celebrating 12 technologists from across the country who have made outstanding technical contributions to projects that demonstrate high levels of innovation and potential impact. Their projects tackle real-world problems through cutting-edge research across a variety of computing subfields like machine learning and AI, bioinformatics, cybersecurity, and more. And just wait until you hear Katrina read their projects. You will be as floored as I am at what these women are doing. I'd like to thank NCWIT's strategic partner, Bank of America, for sponsoring the 2024 Aspirations in Computing Collegiate Award and highlighting the technical accomplishments of these women, genderqueer, and non-binary undergraduate and graduate students. They are also the exclusive sponsor of the Aspirations in Computing High School Award, National Award. The bank's generous sponsorship of the Aspirations in Computing program makes it possible for us to honor and celebrate these national accomplishments. Welcome, Katrina Mumford from Bank of America. We are honored to have Katrina Mumford here to help announce this year's NCWIT AIC Collegiate Award recipients. Katrina has worked for Bank of America for over 20 years in various software development leadership roles. She's an executive sponsor of the Charlotte chapter and the Global Advisory Committee for the bank's Women in Technology and Operations Advocacy Group. She serves as a board member for NCWIT, thank you, and participates as a sponsor, panelist, and volunteer for the NCWIT Aspirations in Computing program. Katrina's tireless efforts to attract and partner with advocacy groups have made her a respected and influential figure in the tech industry. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and part of our relationship Bank of America has with NCWIT is a pleasure to be announcing our collegiate award winners. So as Terry mentioned, you're going to hear a little bit more about their awards. There are 3 different categories the awards we'll talk through. Specifically, we'll start with freshmen and sophomores. They'll go to juniors and seniors and our graduate students. So first, we'll start with honorable mentions and then move into our award winners. So as we go by group, we'll actually hold our applause until we recognize each one of those. So for our freshman and sophomore category, I'd like to recognize Ankini Chibrulu from Texas Academy of Mathematics and Science and University of North Texas. Our next award winner is Divya Gupta from Carnegie Mellon University. And our third one is Shiri Hara Nalamathu from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So congratulations to all of these for our freshman and sophomore honorable mention award recipients. as they receive their awards, and we'll have another applause. Thank you very much. And like I said, we had 3 in this category when one was not able to attend with us today. So now we'll move into our junior and senior category. So, Adriana Penzariu from DePaul University, Rachel Otama from Northeastern University,
Congratulations.
and Anjali Cabrera from the University of Southern California, in which Anjali was not able to join us today. So congratulations to our junior and senior honorable mentions. Okay, so now for our graduate category for honorable mentions. Yusing Hao from Cornell University. Sanaz Rabinia from Wayne State University. And Arushi Surbai from University of Utah.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
So these are our graduate honorable mentions, and thank you very much, as we'll move on to our award winners. So as I mentioned, we had 3 honorable mention categories, and now we'll move on to our collegiate award winners for our 2024 Aspirations in Computing. So these applicants stood out even more so than our honorable mentions when you hear about their talent for innovation and impact and technical accomplishments. And not all of our award winners are here today, but I'll go ahead and recognize each one of them, and you'll hear more about their projects. So the first one who was not able to join is Hannah Guan. And she was from our freshman and sophomore category. She attends Harvard University, and her project, let me read this, is around multi-dimensional interpretable interaction network for modeling aging, health, and mortality. All right, so what was that exactly? So here's the description. So aging is a complex stochastic process that affects healthy functioning through various pathways. So Hannah's research focused on the longitudinal modeling of aging designed to accurately forecast the health trajectories and survival rate of individuals. So her approach incorporates a recurrent neural network to integrate past health data into future health projections, making her model not only computationally cost-effective, but also highly relevant in assessing health risk in older populations. So Hannah's research aims to improve health equity and global health security significantly, offering substantial business benefits to public health and deepening our understanding of the aging process, which we know none of us age here, correct? So please give me a round of applause. Welcome and congratulate Hannah, who wasn't able to join us today. So our next award winner for our collegiate award also was not able to join us today, and that is Ryan Kareem. So they is from the junior and senior category and attends Arizona State University, whose project is Mind Over Matter, Improving Prosthetic Outcomes with Smart Sensors and AI. So about this project, only 1 in 10 people needing prosthetic devices have access due to the high cost and lack of availability. I said 1 in 10 don't have the access. So Ryan's research project aims to develop a prosthetic arm that dramatically changes behavior based on the wearer's existing nerve impulses. They designed an approach that utilizes the body's electrical signals generated during muscle activity to control the movement of a 3D printed battery-powered prosthetic arm. So the arm utilizes machine learning a machine learning algorithm called, this is what it's called, a long short-term memory, to analyze electromyographic signals and distinguish complex hand movements, increasing the range of motion and adaptiveness of the prosthetic, accuracy and reliability. And remember how we started the conversation here. 1 out of 10 don't have access. So with this research, the total cost is just under $450. So this prosthetic is actually affordable and adaptive solution for patients, delivering more natural control and functionality in their daily activities. I can't imagine. Unbelievable. Let's give they a round of applause. So congratulations to Ryan, who's out there. So now we will award our third Collegiate Award winner, who is here today. And I'd like to introduce to you to Doreen Joseph for the graduate category from the University of California, Davis, whose project is embedded firmware binary security analysis using transformers. So the project was around embedded systems that rely on firmware, which has become a major security concern. Now, we've never had any breaches on firmware, right? So Doreen's project aims to leverage a transformer-based embedding model equipped with instruction trace and control flow graph structure, information to learn, semantically rich vector representations of functions in firmware binaries. You all got that, right? So she applied a state-of-the-art technique in graph theory to create a low-dimensional embedding for each function's physical control flow structure. This remarkably improved the model's statistical understanding of disassembled code as compared to the model without the additional CFG structure information. So the results from her technique demonstrated that a structure-aware transformer model notably improves the learning of firmware binary code semantics. Again, you guys got all that, right? So not only is her accomplishments on this project, but also would like to recognize Doreen is also an Aspirations in Computing Stories Ambassador. You may have seen her out on the Media Hub. And you can learn more about her by watching her story, as noted on the Hub. So again, I'd like to give a round of applause to Doreen. Congratulations. So I know we went through all the awardees here today. You'll have an opportunity to meet with them later on. Now you've seen their faces, and I want for each of you to be able to repeat what their projects were. It's actually out on the agenda. You can read more about it. But again, thank you very much to NC WIT for being a partner, and it's wonderful to be here today to present the Collegiate Award. So thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Katrina.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I wasn't supposed to do that. Sorry about that, folks in the back. All right, we now move to the Joanne Cahoon Memorial Plenary in honor of one of NC WIT's founding research scientists. Dr. Cahoon was instrumental to the creation of NC WIT and to establishing our research foundations. Her death was a terrible loss to the entire NC WIT community. At NC WIT, we believe that hosting notable scientists who challenge our thinking and who encourage us to change the way we lead, just as Joanne did, is the very best way to honor her memory. Our next speaker is Dr. Erin Seck. Dr. Seck is an associate professor of sociology at the University of Michigan. She earned her PhD in sociology from the University of California, San Diego, and undergraduate degrees in electrical engineering and sociology from Montana State University. Dr. Seck is a prominent and important voice in exploring engineering culture and education from an equity perspective. Her research examines cultural mechanisms of inequality reproduction. Specifically, how inequality is reproduced through processes that may not be overtly discriminatory, but that are built into seemingly innocuous cultural beliefs or practices. Her work has exposed how these different baked-in mechanisms affect people who identify as women, LGBTQ, as Native American, as having a disability, and other groups that experience discrimination or exclusion. Her first book was titled The Trouble with Passion: How Searching for Fulfillment at Work Fosters Inequality. And her most recent one is Misconceiving Merit: Paradoxes of Excellence and Devotion in Academic Science and Engineering. Many members of the NCWIT research team follow her work closely, and we are thrilled that she has joined us to share her knowledge here at the summit. Thank you, Erin.
Hello, NCWIT. Welcome. I'm so delighted to be here. It is such an honor to be in this position in front of you today, especially with the wonderful person for whom this keynote is in honor. What I want to do today is share with you some there we go. To share with you some work around the space of inequality in STEM as it relates to professional cultures. What I want to do here is identify some themes that might seem familiar to you, that you can feel in the air or get a sense for among your colleagues, but don't yet have words for, don't know how to talk about them. So my broad goal here is to provide some language, some ideas, or some concepts that you might take with you into your workplaces and into the work that you're doing to try and allow you to continue the equity in STEM work that you're doing. The work that I'll be talking about draws on work that is funded by the National Science Foundation, so I absolutely want to acknowledge their support. If you are in this room today, you might have some exposure to topics of inequality in IT, inequality in STEM, but I want to make sure that I get everybody on a little bit of the same page, not assuming that everyone has sort of expert level information and knowledge about this topic. So what I'm going to do in my talk is, first of all, provide some base level statistics and starting assumptions to help us all get a little bit of a baseline. Then I want to talk about what professional cultures are and talk about 3 specific cultural ideologies that my work has shown to be particularly powerful in reproducing inequality. And then answer the question, where do we go from here? If you are sitting in this room today, it is not a surprise to you, likely, that not only are women, people of color, and LGBTQ identifying persons underrepresented numerically in STEM fields, but they're disadvantaged systematically in science and engineering related fields. So looking at gender, for example, we see that there's an underrepresentation of women in most STEM-related fields, and that the higher up in the career trajectories you go, the fewer the women there tends to be. Let's see if I can work my pointer here. Magic. Okay. So what we have here are the leftmost bar. The blue bars represent the percent who identify as women who earn bachelor's degrees, and then those who earn PhD degrees in the middle bar, and those who have a postdoc in those fields in the rightmost bar. And what we find in most fields in STEM is that there's fewer women proportionally the higher up the trajectory that you go, except for in computer science and engineering. We're starting at such a low baseline, there's not much room to drop. It's not meant to be a joke, but it's sort of one of those uncomfortable laughter moments for sure. We see that in industry, people who identify as women are about 21% of industry professionals, but only about 15% of STEM managers. And in STEM industry in the US, only 6% of engineering managers identify as women. In academia, the space is bleak as well. Women are about 36% of those who are an adjunct and other temporary positions, but are only 28% of those on the tenure track and 16% of those who are full professors. And here, only 9% of engineering faculty identify as women. We see persistent gaps for women with children in particular. So in academia, for example, women with children are 35% less likely to enter a tenure-track position than equally qualified men with children who have the same degree pedigree, same level of publication, etc. This is a pattern that is similar along the lines of racial ethnic inequality as well. So we see a similar pattern of underrepresentation that goes higher when you move up the career hierarchy. So when we go from bachelor's degree earners to those who get a PhD, those who go from bachelor's degrees to those who are employed, it becomes more white the higher up you go. And there's profound patterns of harassment and disadvantaged treatment in STEM workforce overall. So for example, 20% of Black men and 32% of Black women who are STEM professionals have reported experiencing harassment in the last 2 years in their STEM workplace. We have tremendous problems relating to racial inequity in the context of STEM. We see that there's patterns related to LGBTQ inequality as well. This is an emergent arena of research, but what my colleagues and my research finds is that the same patterns of disadvantage and inequity along the lines of gender and race ethnicity are occurring for those who identify as LGBTQ as well. So for example, individuals who identify as LGBTQ are significantly more likely to experience professional devaluation, social marginalization, and harassment than their equally qualified peers who don't identify as LGBTQ. But these are not just things that operate along single axes. It's very important when we think about processes of inequity that we think about these intersectionally. And when we talk about intersectionality, we mean that it's not just that people have a gender or a race or a sexual identity, but that we were all incorporated into this matrix of inequality and domination, and then we have to think about how these different patterns intersect in powerful ways. In a study I conducted a couple of years ago, I asked, what does it mean to think about intersectional privilege in STEM? Meaning, what are the experiences of the people who are most advantaged culturally in the context of STEM compared to members of other racial, ethnic, gender, LGBTQ status, etc. types of groups? I conducted this project that was published in Science Advances, and the graphs are a little bit difficult to read, so I have the QR code if you're interested in exploring it further. But what I wanted to know is, first of all, how does this most culturally dominant group, heterosexual white men without disabilities, compared to members of every other one of the 31 other race, by gender, by LGBTQ status, by disability status categories? And what I found is that compared to every one of these other groups, I find that this most culturally dominant group experiences lower levels or greater levels of professional respect significantly than members of all these other groups. The same pattern goes for many other outcomes, including things like harassment. So again, compared to heterosexual white men without disabilities, members of every one of these other 31 groups experience significantly higher rates of harassment than their peers. So what this points us to is that this issue of inequity has a lot of complicated factors to it that we want to think about, not only patterns of disadvantage, but also patterns of privilege. So as a sociologist, I'm really interested in how to explain these patterns, not only documenting them, but trying to understand why we see them and why they're so sticky, why we've been trying to work on these for decades and feel like we've made some nudges in the direction, but haven't solved the problem as of yet. So what I want to speak about in my talk today is this issue of professional cultures. But before I dive into that, I promised some starting assumptions, or rather breaking down some starting assumptions. So when folks come to the space of thinking about inequity in STEM, there's often the assumption that this is something that is driven by bad apples. We have overtly sexist or racist people that are sitting in the corners of our department meetings and our lab meetings, and they're causing the trouble, and everybody else is operating bias-free. But we know that's not the case. Subtle beliefs and practices matter. Things like cognitive bias, microaggressions, the kinds of cultural biases I'll talk about today. They may seem subtle because they're not overtly prejudiced or discriminatory, but because of that, they're incredibly powerful. Another starting assumption that is in this space is that if we just leave these issues of inequity, they'll right themselves over time. But let's see what the data say on this. So this is a graph that represents the proportion of women in STEM bachelor's degrees and STEM PhDs from 1960 all the way through 2000. And we see this expected increase in the rise of women around Title IX and ERA, a really nice gradual increase, right? What we would hope and expect. But something interesting happens around 2000, and it flatlines. On average, there's been relatively little increase in the representation of women in STEM fields since about 2000, and in fields like computer science, there's fewer proportion of women now than there were 20 years ago. So if we leave these patterns on their own without doing any kind of active change, we're not going to make any headway. The next assumption is that if I'm an advantaged member of my workplace or my team, and there's disadvantaged or marginalized members of my team, because we're team members, we see each other in the hallway all the time, I have a good understanding of what their day-to-day experiences are like. If they were experiencing bias, I would know about it because I see them day to day. But it turns out dominant group members are not very good at assessing workplace climate for marginalized groups. So, for example, I looked at a series of 28 organizations with 11,000 participants. Again, these are people who are colleagues with one another, see each other on a regular basis, and I asked them, are there chilly gender climates in your organization? Are there chilly race climates in their organization? And as you might expect, white men, the farthest left bar, were significantly less likely to recognize chilly gender climates and to recognize chilly race climates than racial and ethnic minority men, white women, and racial and ethnic minority women. So again, even though they're people that you see on a day-to-day basis, your own advantaged experiences might have little to do with the way that they're experiencing and the way that they're being treated in the organization. And a final starting assumption is that these are small differences potentially that I'll talk about, but they accumulate greatly over time. If you have a 1% lower chance of getting a grant or getting a paper published over the course of a 10 or 20 or 30-year career, those disadvantages can accumulate greatly to massive gaps in the ability to make change and make impact in one's field. So what I argue in a lot of my work is that professional cultures do a lot to perpetuate these kinds of biases. But what in heaven's name are professional cultures? What is this kind of clunky sociological term? What I mean here is that professional cultures are not just, professions themselves are not just this collection of tasks and knowledge and equations, but that they have rich and historically rooted meaning systems built into and around these tasks and knowledge. Professional cultures give our work meaning and unite us together in a kind of community, in social group. Even though we might have different jobs or work in different kinds of industries, professional cultures are why you feel connected to another member of your profession. So, for example, if you meet somebody on an airplane that shares your profession, you might know nothing else about this person, but all of a sudden you met somebody who gets you, right? You might do super different kinds of stuff, but instantly there's a sense of connection. Professional cultures are also the things that make profession memes funny. So I'm sure that I could have gathered up some IT-related memes, but to save you from that, I will present you a meme from sociology. Do I have any folks who are trained in sociology in the room? All right, this might be like, this is much more likely to be resonant to you than it is to anybody else. But the idea here is you're socialized in sociology. You get this because you were socialized into the professional culture. But if you aren't socialized into the professional culture, you're not in the in-group, right? These professional cultures get perpetuated through our journals and our conferences and our listservs. And importantly for this room, they are passed down to the next generation of profession members through a process that sociologists call professional socialization. And in professional socialization, students not only learn circuits and thermodynamics, they learn to be a member of the profession, to take on this identity, to take on the culture of their own. So professional cultures are important because I argue that biases can be built right into them. And they're powerful because you can have a department or a workplace that itself is very committed to promoting equality. But if there are biases that are rooted in these professional cultures, and those professional cultures are things that are valued in that department or in their workplace, these things will be perpetuated regardless. As I said, each profession has its own unique culture. And I recognize that I'm going to be talking here about STEM professional cultures. And I know that different STEM fields are quite different. Chemistry is different than chemical engineering, is different than physics. But what I'm going to talk about here are 3 specific cultural ideologies that are salient in STEM overall. They might go up and down in salience depending on what particular STEM field you're in, but across the board, these are things that are resonant. Okay, so let me jump into the first one, schemas of scientific excellence. This first ideology here is a bit of a mouthful, but what I refer to here is the idea that there are characteristics and skills that are assumed to be markers of professional competence and excellence within a field. You can think about these as cultural yardsticks we use for measuring up people in our profession. Anytime we meet another member of our profession, or maybe somebody who wants to be part of our profession, we pull out our cultural yardstick. We measure them up. Do they have these characteristics and skills that are markers of competence and excellence in our field? As you can imagine, these schemas of scientific excellence are extremely influential in hiring, promotion, funding, graduate school admissions, etc. But what can happen is that the characteristics and skills that are assumed to be markers of competence in this cultural yardstick actually can be markers, can be biased in particular ways. So when I give talks to rooms full of STEM professionals, I will often ask them questions of, what are markers of competence and excellence in your field? And inevitably, I get people saying things like mathematical prowess and logical thinking. But very rarely will people say things like being a good grant writer, being a good lab manager, being a good mentor. But if you can't write a grant, if you can't manage a lab, if you can't mentor the folks in your team, it's very unlikely that you reach the kind of success that you need. But here we have a slippage between the things that are actually required of success and the things that are most valued as markers of competence and excellence in a field. And it's that slippage that allows for bias to creep in. So schemas of scientific excellence can reproduce inequality when the particular constellation of characteristics that define competence are more often automatically associated with one group of STEM professionals than others. So mathematical prowess is sort of the marker of competence in STEM par excellence. But mathematical prowess is more often automatically associated with white men than it is, for example, Latino women. So although these yardsticks may seem to us to be neutral or bias-free judgments of professional skill, they can be gendered, racialized, heteronormative, and ableist. Let me give you a couple of examples of how this can work. So the first example comes from some research that my colleague and I did, interviewing and surveying members of STEM faculty. And we wanted to know, first of all, what did they think were markers of excellence in STEM? So what are the characteristics they thought were part of the scheme of scientific excellence? And they told us things like creative brilliance, but they also said things like assertive leadership, being competitive, being risk-taking, being self-promoting. So we said, okay, well, if you have those characteristics, do you get paid more? Right? If those are value characteristics, do you get the reward that's attached to it? And we found that, yes, net of their demographics, their discipline, their sort of level in their career, we found that STEM faculty who had these kind of assertive characteristics had higher salaries on average. But are these actually related to productivity? What we found is that there was no statistical relationship between whether or not somebody had these assertive leadership characteristics, whether they were competitive, self-promoting, and risk-taking, and the level of productivity they had in terms of publication rates, publication visibility, and grant success. In other words, this is something that is culturally valued, but isn't necessarily tied to success in the way that we would expect. Another way to think about this is to the extent to which the idea of promoting diversity is seen as important to a successful member of one's discipline. Again, we surveyed STEM faculty and we said, okay, how important is it to you personally to promote diversity? And we were happy that 75% of faculty said, yeah, promoting diversity is personally important to me. But then we asked them, how important is promoting diversity in your sense of a successful member of your discipline? 21% agreed. So even if they personally value it, it doesn't mean they see it as a marker of excellence in their field. A third way that this can show up is when schemas of scientific excellence can influence what research focus is considered the most relevant or most prestigious within an area. For example, a gay biology graduate student that I interviewed explained the inherent bias he sees in biology's primary focus on heterosexual reproduction. He explained, I had a course that I hated because it was just so binary. It was all male, female, not about all the other genders, all the fish that have 3 or 4 gender mating systems. We're so invisible that it hurts. Bias is not just about people making homophobic jokes in the classroom, but how badly biased our choices of teaching and research focus. So it's important to reflect on the ways that what might be considered the most cutting-edge research or cutting-edge innovation in a space might predominantly be the arenas that are most often dominated by the most prestigious intersexually privileged groups. So after each of these ideologies, I'll put up a reflection question for a couple of seconds, and I will put those up at the very end of my talk. And this is just something to get you started to think about these topics in your own experiences. So the reflection question for this ideology is, how is excellence judged in your workplace? How might social stereotypes get folded into those definitions of excellence? All right, the second ideology I want to talk about is the ideology of depoliticization. And by way of introduction, I would like to present what I think is sort of a now classic XKCD cartoon. Anybody seen this before? It's been around, it's been out there. What we have is fields arranged by purity. What we have on the left side, sociologists. We are the least pure because we are in the messiness of human culture and politics, right? Then we have psychologists that are looking at sociologists and saying, sociology is just applied psychology. The biologists are looking at psychologists saying psychology is just applied biology, on down the line where we have mathematicians looking back at everybody else saying, oh, hey, I didn't see you guys way over there. Right, the punchline here is that the most valued, the most pure fields in STEM are often seen as the ones that are most able to extract the messiness of human culture and social issues from them. But I would argue that the very idea that we can extract that messiness of human social and cultural issues is itself a cultural ideology. This is what I call depoliticization. Formally defined, it is the belief that STEM is a pure space that not only can be stripped of social and cultural concerns, but should be. The only way that we can do pure, neutral, objective work is to remove those concerns as far as possible. And I want to be clear here that I'm talking about small p politics, not capital P politics, in the way that we think about our political system in the United States. Although depoliticization seems like something that is resonant in the context of STEM more broadly, it doesn't map onto reality. Decisions about what we study, what is funded, how we define problems are inherently cultural and social issues because humans make them, right? The electrons are not whispering to us what about them we should study. Those are decisions that are made by researchers and often by the funders of the people who are engaged in that research. But the ideology of depoliticization is consequential for inequality because it promotes the idea of talking about inequality as something that pollutes the objectivity and neutrality of STEM itself. It brings in political concerns where they're not supposed to belong. So the ideology of depoliticization shuts down conversations about diversity and inequity in STEM contexts. I actually see engineering students learning this ideology through the course of their engineering undergraduate experiences. So I've studied cohorts of students across 4 universities, tracking them in their first year of school in undergraduate as engineers through their time in university and into their post-graduation experiences in the workforce. When we socialize engineers to be engineers, we really want them to take serious their professional and ethical responsibilities, right? We want them to grow in the importance of those things as they get trained to be engineers. But what I found was the opposite. I found that over the course of their time in undergraduate engineering education, the importance to them of their professional and ethical responsibilities significantly declined. The importance to them of understanding the consequences of engineering, the consequences of technology declined. And the importance to them of understanding how people use machines significantly declined over time. And these were related to the extent to which their engineering programs emphasized the idea of depoliticization. But it is not just engineering students. In a survey of US STEM professionals, I asked them, first of all, does raising concerns about diversity undermines one's credibility as a scientist or engineer? 1 in 5 US STEM professionals agreed with this statement. 1 in 4 agreed that raising concerns about diversity undermines one's objectivity as a scientist or engineer. And 38% agreed that social issues like inequality should be separated from science and engineering work. In a project I'm engaged in right now, I'm finding that engineers who are attached to this idea of depoliticization find that concerns about tech bias and biased AI are less important and less of a concern than engineers who don't have attachment to this idea of depoliticization. This is an extremely powerful and potentially dangerous cultural ideology. So when we think about this idea of bracketing these social issues from STEM, it means that existing power structures are legitimated and reinforced. This is really clearly articulated in an interview with a gay computer science student. She explained, "In my department, the issue of sexual identity is sort of invisible. I think most of them are straight dudes who really don't think about the existence of people who are not like them. I think they have so much privilege that they can't understand what it's like for people who don't have that privilege." So if depoliticization means that it is illegitimate to talk about issues of inequality, except within these explicitly defined diversity and inclusion settings like this summit, how are we to make any headway? The question for this ideology is, how might depoliticization silence conversations about diversity and inequality in your workplace? The third ideology I want to talk about is the meritocratic ideology. And this is the one that probably sounds the most familiar to you. This is an anchor of the idea of the American dream, that if you work hard and you put in the effort, that anyone can succeed regardless of their background, and it just takes individual talent and training and motivation. But the opposite of this is that those who don't achieve success somehow lack that individual talent and training. And it puts the blame on the marginalized and minoritized groups who are fighting for equal representation and treatment in the context of STEM. To give you an example of how this operates, I again will return to the data from STEM faculty. So I asked them a number of other questions in this survey. I asked them, first of all, why are women and people of color underrepresented in STEM? Some of them gave me explanations that were meritocratic. So some said that, well, women and people of color just aren't motivated to be successful in STEM. Some of them said they just don't want to get the right human capital. And other faculty gave structural explanations, things that social scientists would use to explain these processes. And what I find is that STEM faculty who give meritocratic explanations were more likely to say, no, there's been no instance of discriminatory treatment in my department in the last 3 years. And they were also less likely to recognize chilly climates in their own department. In other words, attachment to the meritocratic ideology can render invisible discrimination and bias happening in one's own STEM department. So the reflection question for this ideology is, who in your workplace still needs to be convinced that there are unequal processes that actually exist in STEM? Okay, so I want to talk about 3 steps for thinking about how to deal with these issues of these ideologies, or at least begin to think about how to deal with them. The first and probably most important is to check our understanding of STEM excellence. If we have been socialized into these fields, we likely have deep commitments, or at least deep resonances, with how excellence and competence are defined in our own discipline. We have to think very deeply, not only in our profession, but in ourselves, and how we think about excellence in these fields. Because we are socialized into these ideas, they are difficult to see, and thus become hard to change. So we need to think about how we define excellence. Who and what are we leaving out when we define excellence in that way? And what would be a more encompassing definition of excellence? What would be the characteristics, and who would be included in those definitions of excellence? Second, I think we should try and cultivate what's called a DEI growth mindset. So if we have been socialized into these ideologies, it is likely that we are contributing to the promotion of these inequalities in large and small ways. So we need to be very conscientious about how they are informing our own ways of acting and reacting. Instead of identifying with a fixed DEI mindset, which is the belief that things like racism, sexism, homophobia are binary, people are racist or they're not, they're sexist or they're not, it's much more effective to think about a growth mindset approach to DEI, meaning that everyone has room to improve. Assume that we all have implicit biases that we can work on and dismantle, lean into discomfort and admit our shortcomings, and create environments where that admission and that working through is something that is valued rather than shunned or shamed. centering learning and listening in the journeys in our organizations, accepting critical feedback when we receive it, when our team receives it, and working on calling in rather than calling out. Third, we need to challenge these ideologies in our organizations and institutions. If you hear nothing from me, hear this: that the idea to address these is not about fixing group members who are historically disadvantaged to be more like heterosexual white men without disabilities. Right? That only puts the burden on those who are already disadvantaged and won't solve these ideologies in the long run. We need to think about how to address them more directly. So regarding schemas of scientific excellence, we need to be more conscious about how competence and excellence are conceptualized. Be really wary of discussions about fit or who's a star. Anytime these big global terms are used, there's the opportunity for those biases to creep in when we pull out our yardsticks. Regarding depoliticization, quite simply, if we don't talk about inclusion and equity, the silence itself reproduces the status quo. The limitation of advancements or even progress at all on diversity-related concerns legislatively is meant to do precisely this. The silence itself reproduces the unequal status quo. We have to think about how to legitimize topics of diversity and inequality in these spaces rather than hide them away. And finally, regarding the meritocratic ideology, we can't assume that everyone in our department or in our workplace sees that there's actually a problem to be addressed. And if your colleagues believe that the patterns of difference are the patterns of fairly functioning systems, they're not going to be particularly supportive of any kind of initiatives that attempt to undermine those processes. So the first step is to explain that there is a problem that needs to be addressed in the first place. Broadly, because these kinds of cultures are taken for granted and enduring and may seem harmless on their surface, they can be incredibly powerful forces reproducing inequality within STEM fields. And it's really only by naming and challenging them can we hope to undermine their effects. And with that, I welcome your Q&A. And there's mic runners on both sides, so feel free to raise your hand.
Hi, thank you. That was awesome. I would like a question that kind of came up with the last thing that you said with the systems and explaining that there are inequalities to people that aren't able to see it at that moment. How do you work within the systems where that is benefiting, the people that are benefiting from the systems, and that's sometimes difficult to change those systems? What is your advice for that scenario?
Yeah, thank you for that great question. So there's a variety of tactics, I think, for attempting to get people on board in conversations about there being a problem. And so one of the most effective ways, I think, are presenting data in a particular way, and that's by the combination of quantitative data and qualitative data. So what can happen when people want to slide away from recognition? If you present numerical information, there's often this want to discount what's being there because it's not in a form of individual people's stories. Or if you just present qualitative data and individual stories, people can say, well, that's just a couple of examples, that's not the broad pattern. So having both of those in hand becomes incredibly popular. As you notice, that's precisely what I did, right? I had both statistics and vignettes. But for people who are particularly reticent to accept that there's an issue at all, one of my favorite tactics is actually just to walk back and say, how can we think about the idea of critiquing STEM as a meritocracy at all? And that for some can be really challenging, because if you've gone through your entire career believing that STEM is fair and equitable, and that you have gotten there in a fair way, you're going to be kind of hesitant to give up the idea that STEM is meritocratic. One of the most effective ways actually to push back on that is to get people to talk about ways that they have been disadvantaged, that hasn't necessarily been along the lines of historical underrepresentation in terms of identity. So most people who have been in academia for any length of time, for example, have a story about how a paper was rejected by a journal from ways that seemed totally unfair. Like there was some, inside baseball stuff happening, like that wasn't fair. And so when you can get especially intersectionally privileged individuals to push back on that fairness, it creates a wedge for thinking more broadly about how STEM might not be working equitably. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Great presentation, by the way. So you did present 3 very good ideologies. But I want to ask a question is, how do you think colorblind ideologies play into this equation?
Absolutely, thank you for that question. So colorblind ideology is this belief in the United States and in other cultural contexts, but particularly in the US, that we are post-racial, that we have, that things that look like they are racial patterns are just a matter of culture, or just a matter of preference or values within families or communities. This is a really potent way that racism is reproduced in the context of the United States because people can articulate these sort of colorblind ideologies and say, well, I'm not talking about race, I'm talking about culture, or I'm talking about values or something like that, right? And so it doesn't read as sort of racist in the same way. So these are very much in line with the notion of colorblind racism in that it's an ideology that can be extremely potent, but isn't necessarily read as overtly racist. So the idea of depoliticization, I think, acts a lot like colorblind racism in that it's saying, we're not really supposed to be talking about these ideas, so we need to shut them down. We need to not talk about them at all. In the same way that colorblind racism often is, we're not talking about race here, we're talking about something else. So I see it as a cultural ideology that is much broader than STEM, that absolutely operates in the context of STEM to reinforce racism in the same way. Thanks for your question.
Hello. Hi. I'm more about practice. Is that right? Practicalities. I want to know from your experience and years of doing this research and the data supporting it, what can all of us in this room walk away with that can help move the needle a bit? I tell you why I'm asking this question. We've seen statistics, we've seen research, we've seen people talk about this subject over and over and over. And I've even seen in the workplace that we are almost about to tilt the scale in a way that is becoming dangerous. We're talking about the straight white man who is not, who's dominant. We have all these business resource groups in companies where you see more of us segregated in groups, either the African American business resource group, the computer group, women and all of that in different groups with this particular group of people that we think should be in the room hearing all of our challenges and become allies helping us. Was in a way segregating them as well. And I feel like without that kind of movement, we may not be able to move the needle where we want it to be. And it is difficult wrestling power away from the powerful. But if you have them understand the challenges, they have sisters, they have, cousins who look like us or sound like us. I saw this with when Floyd's incident happened. Everybody noticed every company has a DEI officer. There were talks about DE&I. But as the years goes, you notice that we are now enacting either state laws that are slowly but surely chipping away all the progress that were made. It's a long question, but it is all to get all of us thinking differently than the way we've been thinking all these years. We've done a lot. Telling the story directly to somebody who can walk in your shoes for a mile, can actually resonate more than me just presenting numbers to them. This is why when you ask in your case, a lot of the male, those who are actually in power say, I don't see a problem here. What is the problem? These people are lazy. They're not getting involved. They're not self-motivated. So that's all. I'm asking for one or two things I can walk away with and implement. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that question because I think it raises attention in a lot of organizations around something like ERGs, which is making space for communities to be safe spaces, to be spaces of advocacy and support. But in doing so, seeing that as the only solution for addressing diversity and equity concerns. When you look at the way that a lot of organizations are addressing diversity and equity and DEI-related efforts, it's about this kind of, it's almost sort of psychological. It's like, I want to change people's minds. But it's not just the changing of people's minds, it's an understanding of the profession more broadly, right? It's a re-socialization into what this looks like. And that means everybody has to be at the table. Everybody has to be grappling with these things. And I think that the way that, and I'll get to some specifics in a second, but I think in general, the way that organizations are addressing diversity and equity concerns has to keep the intersectionally privileged groups in the room and engage them in ways that allows them to reflect on how their own experiences do or do not resonate with the experiences of their immediate colleagues. A paper that I recently published found that white men who personally experienced bullying and harassment in their workplace were more likely to recognize race and gender bias in their organization and to speak up when it happened. And so this suggests that there's a long way to go before we really understand how to get intersectionally privileged people on board with diversity and equity concerns. Okay, so what are some tactics, some takeaways? So regarding schema scientific excellence, really make sure that hiring and promotion spaces are banned from using words like fit and star. Right? Anytime there are those terms that are used, a colleague has to immediately say, what do you mean by that? How do we determine fit? How do we determine who's part of our culture? How do we determine who's a star? Right? The research shows that processes that use rubrics are systematically more fair than processes that don't use hiring rubrics. The evidence is super clear on that. We also have the opportunity, I think interestingly, ironically, in this moment where there's this pushback on we can't have conversations about diversity and equity in some spaces, to say, well, that doesn't mean that we can't have conversations about what it really takes to succeed in our field. And those are conversations about re-evaluating and reassessing what it really takes that can have the opportunity to open up those schemas of scientific excellence into realms that are more inclusive. Regarding depoliticization, if you sense that there are places in your organizations where it would be the most awkward to have conversations about diversity and inequity, those are precisely the places where those conversations have to be had. So using that kind of like ooginess rating to assess that, I think is a really clear way for you to get a sense of where those need to happen the most. And regarding the meritocratic ideology, I think what I found is that systems that are able to speak back data to organizations about how they're doing on specific metrics can be very powerful, because a lot of organizations say, well, that's not us, right? That's just broadly. But it's really hard to deny when you're sort of unit and you see the unit in ways that are appropriately anonymized become in that space. So thank you for the opportunity to share those.
We have one back here. Oh, sure. Great talk. Thank you so much. My question is about economic lenses on things. So many entities, their priority is profit, right? Economic growth. And so I remember learning about World Bank economists that would intentionally insulate themselves from learning about the human impacts of their decisions, because the only metric was economic growth. And so I just wanted to know if you could speak to that, like an economic lens on this and how it fits with your kind of Venn diagram.
Absolutely, thank you. So what the research shows is that more diversified teams produce better results. And that is for a number of reasons. So one is because it means that people are using different sort of taken for granted schemes of decision making and brainstorming. So our backgrounds, how we grew up, inform a lot of the sort of instincts that we have about problem solving. And so the more people you have in a room that have different ways of approaching problems means that you get a more diverse set of solutions. You get better solutions. When we have more diversified groups of decision makers, people have to be more conscientious about articulating the assumptions they have about problem definitions and solution, and that leads to better solutions, better outcomes. But even on the basis of singular technologies, the example I like to use a lot is when I was in graduate school, I was speaking with a postdoc who was the member of this lab that were designing facial recognition software to help autistic children learn how to read facial expression. And this postdoc and his team were super excited about what they were doing. They're like, this is social impact, this is fantastic. Let's bring in some high school students to show them how cool computer science and engineering are. And so they brought students from a majority students of color high school in the area. And one after another, the students couldn't get the software to work, or rather the software wouldn't work with the students. And one of the students says, it doesn't work for brown people. And it didn't, because no one in the lab happened to have melanated skin. And so they didn't think to test it on anybody but themselves, right? So this is such an example, and there's like millions of those out there, that not understanding the context of design makes the design worse. And that's not a far stretch to think about the sort of economic and profit-related concerns in that.
Hey, my name's Anita.
Hi.
Thank you so much for this discussion. It's been absolutely riveting. And I think about the whole stereotype of your skewed sense of what excellence should be, right? Your biased idea about what it is, and how sometimes I agree that that could skew our idea of what success would look like. Give you an example, okay? Let's say that you're a psychiatrist or a therapist, right? And you meet somebody with schizophrenia, right? And you treat them. They don't like that treatment, but you're treating them and tell them you're not normal because you hear voices, and you're not normal because you see things that other people can't see. Are you that person? Can you really tell that they're not normal? Maybe you're deficient because you can't see what they see, right? So when you're creating the treatment, if there is truly an illness, let's say you grabbed a neurodivergent person to participate, then that way when you decide to diagnose medication, it's not something that's going to have a negative reaction. And so I think that the answer, as you said, is to include more to get better solutions that fit everybody. It doesn't eliminate the solutions from the, I don't want to call it superior, that one from your dynamic. It just means that we have more for everyone else.
Absolutely, thank you for that. It's so important to think about the way that these biases can be built into problem definition and solution, and even the conceptualization of what are appropriate realms of consideration, right? So there's been a lot of talk about programs like Engineers Without Borders, where it involves undergraduate students in engineering and computer science sometimes too, to go do kind of development work. And often there's little or no education about the broader sociocultural context that this is being done in, little engagement with how to interact with those who are in the spaces in a space that allows, that promotes the dignity and the voices of the people whose communities you're engaged in. And as a result, in a benign way, sometimes the technologies aren't used. In more negative circumstances, those technologies sometimes create greater fissions or fissures within the communities. It can be incredibly damaging. So even spaces where we feel like we're doing well, if we're not taking these contexts into account, they can perpetuate inequities in all sorts of ways.
So, Patty Lopez from New Mexico State. One of the things I was thinking about, since you talked about AI and all its potential to do harm, is if we really thought enough about ways that we can use it to point out these bias systems. So one idea that I had was if we could use an AI to listen in meetings, then find out who the interrupters are, find out who the people are who take credit for other people's ideas, and use it to take notes and to capture, because when you're having a discussion, somebody can make a comment that changes the whole flow of how a decision is made, but that person doesn't get credit. It's the person who actually does the work. So in that vein, I was looking at the article. I had pulled it up on my phone, and I think you'll get a kick. You probably read it. The new study, I Forgot That You Existed, Role of Memory Accessibility in the Gender Citation Gap, right? So what can we do in our publication, our conference review cycles to use AI to help say, here's the statistics for this paper. It's clearly cited themselves several times, didn't cite these other researchers who are, let's just say, black or female or whatever. How can we use these types of tools to point out where there is clearly bias in how we make these decisions, and then they roll up to promotions and all kinds of other awards and things that impact people's careers.
Yeah, that's awesome. The idea of having sort of AI listening into meetings and then potentially pointing out bias would be such an interesting thing, because I imagine that those who are intersectionally privileged and had the bias pointed out would then be in a space to critique the AI as being biased in a very interesting way. So I think that there could be potential for that, but I think there's more kind of lower tech solutions that are probably way more effective than anything that would be super high tech and advanced, and that could be just looking at the proportions of citations or the proportions of speakers in a seminar series that have different sort of sociodemographic representations or something, and that could be some kind of filter depending on the sort of access we have to that sort of information. I'm not a big fan of coding people via name. There's all kinds of problems with that. I do think that the reliance on AI to help us address some of these biases is a potentially interesting question, but I'm quite skeptical of the potential for that, because I'm speaking far outside of my own arena of expertise to a room full of people who are much more expertise on this than me. So I understand the risk of saying this, but my understanding of the way that AI data training sets exist is they often use data that's in the real world, and real world data are biased, and so it's really difficult to unbias the data that is being developed. And so there may be a lot of good examples in the works, but I think we're more reliant. I think it's better to be reliant on more lower tech things that we kind of fully understand the algorithms of and can explain the algorithms of to the people who are in decision-making spaces at this stage.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions for
Great.
now.
Thank you so much for your engagement. I appreciate it.
Speaker gift for you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you very much.
appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Lovely. Thank you.
Should we pick apart our papers? All right, thank you, Erin, for that remarkable presentation. The creation and preservation of equity is fundamental to NCWIT's work, and we're so appreciative of the leading research and work you've done in this space.